I will begin. I am Mary Hunt from Water. I'm here with my partner Diane New, also from Water. And we are happy to co-host this morning along with our sisters from the Women of Dignity. We are happy to continue this quarterly program of Sunday morning calls with our siblings in Dignity and in other groups. I want to invite us this morning, a rather special morning, to take a short moment of silence to direct our collective energies toward peace and an end to the war in Ukraine. So if you would join me in taking a minute of silence in our collective to train our energies on peace. Thank you. Holy One, in your wisdom, help us find peace. Thank you. The war in Ukraine is not our topic this morning, but I know it is on all of our hearts and minds. And so I hope that the good energies of this gathering will go to furthering the efforts of peace. I begin this morning with a land acknowledgement and invite you to think about the people on whose land you sit today. Water is located on the land of the Piscataway and Anacostan people. We acknowledge their rights and ownership, and we lift up the fact that Native people, like Black and Brown people, have been treated unjustly and harmed through colonialism. Our work at Water is dedicated to changing these realities through education, activism, and spiritually informed analysis. Water is delighted this morning to collaborate with the Women of Dignity as we explore the many ways people who come from faith traditions continue to live with integrity in a blatantly unjust world. A world now at war, dealing with systemic racism, suffering from aching poverty, scandalous greed, and unequal access to basic human needs. And so I welcome my friend and colleague, Honor Maddock of Dignity. I also acknowledge that Marianne Duddy-Burke, Dignity's Executive Director, is with us, but I turn to Honor for a welcome from the Women of Dignity. Honor?
Thank you, Mary. The Women of Dignity have loved all our collaborations with Water, and we look forward every year to our programs together, and there seems to be endless topics that we can work together. But we are very excited to hear from our sisters from a different tradition, and they're to enlighten us on where they've been and where we should be going. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you, Honor, and thank you to the Women of Dignity. So our agenda this morning is that I will introduce, I'd ask you to mute your phone, please. Mute your phones, please. I'm going to introduce our guests and our theme, and then we will have conversation among our three guests with questions and discussion, and then we'll open the mic shortly after 12 or 9 if you're on the West Coast. We'll open the floor for conversation among all of us, and then we will end promptly at 12:30 with a prayer of thanks. And the Zoom will stay open afterwards. If you want to stay on, hang out, talk with your friends, continue the conversation, you're welcome to do that. But we also know that our guests are busy people and we can't intrude upon their time, though they are, of course, welcome to stay on. And we will continue conversation as we will. We're recording this call. We will edit it or delete sections of it if there's anything sensitive. But due to the value of this conversation for the larger justice movement, we decided to record it. And if you would not like to be seen or known on the call, please turn off your camera, change your name. People who don't want their identity publicized can certainly do that. We don't take any offense. And if you have any privacy concerns afterwards, please contact us at Water or Dignity USA. But otherwise, with your cooperation, we will continue to record this call, because it's not every day that I get to bring lots of my friends together. And there is nothing better in this work than introducing people that you've known in different parts of your life. And I certainly feel the great privilege of bringing three wonderful women and their friends and entourages from around the globe with us today. So our group of, just to explain to you, dear guests, our group of women has been meeting as Catholics or Catholic identified people for more years than I can say. We are predominantly, though not entirely, thanks be to God, a white group, mostly but not all women of a certain age, open to and welcoming of younger women, including those persons who are non-binary. As we think about our future, we realize that we can learn a lot from Protestant leaders who have distinguished yourselves and gotten results over the long years in your leadership of LGBTIQA+ groups. We plan to do a similar conversation in the spring with Jewish women because their experiences are similar and all of our commitments as religious people are intertwined. We who come from the Catholic tradition puzzle about our next steps. We need new insights. So we welcome three esteemed guests this morning. They bring enormous experience. They're highly respected and deeply beloved leaders of their respective groups. They are people that I could just pick up the phone or send an email and say, hey, will you be with us? And I knew that if they asked me, I would say yes in a heartbeat. And my only regret is that they're not here at the house for brunch. And Celeste, you had a vision here once. I remember you were, I believe it was a vision of the Virgin Mary in a wine glass. The details are lost to me, but I know that you had a deeply religious experience right here at my house one time. And Loie is a frequent house guest when she can be COVID released, I should say, released from the throes of COVID regulations. And Janie, you are more than welcome anytime the spirit gets you to the DC area. So I want to just welcome all of you and just apologize that we're not here at the table. Let me give the briefest of thumbnail sketches so that you all know who's talking with us this morning. I'm going to leave out the many adventures of our youth. I think those would not be fit matter this morning. And then I'm going to raise a few questions for our guest consideration before we open the floor. And I really see this as a wonderful historic opportunity for women from different religious traditions to talk with each other about what makes for success, what needs to happen, where do we go from here, how do we work together. Let me start with Celeste Berry, speaking of success. She's the founder of a very successful group called Out and Equal. It says of itself, and I quote, it's the premier organization working exclusively on LGBTQ workplace equality. Through our worldwide programs, they say, Fortune 500 partnerships and our annual Workplace Summit Conference, we help LGBTQ people thrive and support organizations creating a culture of belonging for all. Celeste was a Presbyterian-trained minister, all dressed up with no place to go, because 30 years ago, the Presbyterian Church wouldn't ordain queer folks. She kicked the dust from her Birkenstocks, as it were, and instead put on her business clothes and put her stunning talents to work, organizing people in the business world, the military, the government, to develop resources for fair and equal treatment policies. Celeste Berry is the primary reason why much of the business world is so far ahead of many religious groups on matters of equality. Little known fact about Celeste: before setting up this multi-million dollar world-changing organization, Out and Equal, Celeste started another, a little bit smaller group called SLUTS, Seminary Lesbians Under Theological Stress. Some of us are proud members of SLUTS, and I actually have the black with pink day glow SLUTS t-shirt, which is in pristine condition, never having been worn on a human body. You remain, Celeste, our fearless leader. Our second guest today is my dear friend from the United Church of Christ, Lois Martha Powell, better known as Loie, my friend of more than 45 years from graduate school in Berkeley. Loie has ministered in local congregations and went on to serve as the executive director for the Coordinating Center for Women in Church and Society, and later in the UCC's Department of Justice and Witness Ministries, where she worked tirelessly on peace issues and leadership development. She was an advocate for women and queer people until her retirement in 2016, although she continues to advocate outside of those structures, and was awarded the UCC's Antoinette Brown Award for her pioneering leadership. Loie, as well as Celeste and Janie, were part of CLOUT, Christian Lesbians Out Together, CLOUT. And that group was dedicated, and I quote again from their mission statement, to celebrate the miracle of being Christian, lesbian, and out simultaneously in ways that aim to be anti-racist, anti-classist, and milagro-bound, unquote. COUT is no longer active, but it provided a strong foundation for many of us through the 70s and 80s when support was scant. Loie and her partner Brenda Joyner are avid golfers who put a lot of energy into social change issues of our day, especially anti-racism and reproductive justice. Loie is a slut scale, I'm sure, and a little known fact about Loie is that she worked for Redwood Records with Holly Near back in the day. She's also a fabulous cook and always a welcome house guest. Great to have you, Loie. And third, Jane Addams Spar, known to God and all the world as Janie. Janie is a legend in LGBTIQ circles. Like Celeste, she is a lesbiterian who ministered in the Bay Area and then co-founded the Ministry of Light, which became the Spectrum Center for Lesbian, Gay, Bisexual, and Transgender Concerns, for which she was the executive director for 10 years. Then came an offer from the Downtown Presbyterian Church in Rochester, New York, for Janie to join their ministry team. It's a long story, which I'll make very short by saying simply that some local churches protested her hiring. They were supported by the Permanent Judicial Commission, essentially overruling the local church's welcome of Janie, something rarely done according to Presbyterian polity. Just as Celeste shook the dust, so too Janie was unleashed as a roving lesbian evangelist, in which capacity she changed a lot of hearts and minds. She established a wonderful organization entitled That All May Freely Serve, which worked with More Like Presbyterians and others to bring about the ordination of LGBTIQ people in 2011, after only 33 years of debate. Janie is retired from this work, well done, good and faithful servant, but busy with projects including the Trans Heartline. This is a wonderful house in the Bay Area where people can rest and recover after gender affirmation surgery. Janie was one of the grand marshals of the San Francisco Pride Parade 2 years ago. Janie Spar, always leading the way to justice. So you can see that I have invited three very dear Protestant friends to meet with Catholics for a conversation. Protestant LGBTQ women ministers share their insights. Welcome, my dears, and let's chat. Help us to learn from your experience and let's work together. So first, tell us about your work in the LGBTIQA religious movements over the long years. I have given a bit longer intro than I might have just because I know you would be modest. And I wanted people to have at least the contours of the great work that you've done. But give us a highlight or two from your perspective, just to give us the flavor of what you think is most important. I'm going to start with Celeste, and then we'll go to Loie, and then to Janie. Celeste, the floor is yours, and welcome.
Thank you, Mary. I think that was one of my very favorite introductions I've had. Yeah, I met Janie when I was a brand new seminarian in, I keep thinking it was like 10 years ago, but it was more like 30 plus years ago, going to the San Francisco Theological Seminary after teaching school for a number of years in Texas. And I was just coming out and learned very quickly that if I actually came out, that I wasn't going to be able to actually get ordained and follow this chosen career path that I had kind of moved across the country in order to pursue. And I spent a lot of time trying to figure out, well, now what? But as Mary said, was able to kind of come out fully by starting Sluts and then getting between Janie and Melanie and Loie and Mary and Diane, coming together with Clout was really an opportunity to just find each other and create community and kind of a beloved community of people and women and lesbians who all share such similar justice-seeking faith and spirituality. But I was just carried this, it was way beyond disappointment that I wouldn't be able to get ordained once I came out, and just felt so strongly that we should be able to do whatever we want professionally, regardless of who we love. And over a period of a couple of years, began starting, and then eventually was created Out and Equal Workplace Advocates. And it's kind of ironic. And Mary, I didn't really ask you how much time I had, but when I was 7, so you'll just wave when you're like, I'll try and make it short.
Yeah, make it short. We've got 3 people and 3 questions. So go ahead. When you were 7.
I was 7, and So so Out and Equal was just it became a very successful international organization. Our first conference had 200 people there, and I thought, there's 200 people, but our most recent conference had 6,000 people from 60 countries. So it kind of grew up, and it just totally helped me understand my mindset. Here I was in this loving, church community that rejected me and my sisters and brothers and siblings. And here was corporate America that was embracing LGBTQ people. So anyway, I could say a lot more about that. Currently, I now work with LGBTQ refugees, primarily in Greece and in Africa. And my heart just goes out that I'm on calls and WhatsApp groups consistently around many things that people are dealing with that are refugees. But in Africa, so many of the people are just struggling with getting kicked out of the church and having their church elders be the ones that show up and do horrific things to their families because they're part of the LGBTQ community and that they love who they love. So that works.
Thanks, Celeste. I'm gonna move on to Loie, and we'll get back to you in just a minute. Go ahead, Lo. What for you actually has been perhaps a highlight of your own work in the movements? And there have been many, I know, but just again, so we can keep it brief, so we can get more people in the conversation in time. Go ahead, Lo.
Right. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks for this invitation. And also thank you, Women of Dignity, for your faithfulness over the years. I come from a denomination that is not hierarchical in the same way that the Catholic Church is, or even the Presbyterians are, which is what occasioned it was not easy to get ordained, but the possibility of that. Bill Johnson had already been ordained in 1972 as the first out gay clergy person in the United Church of Christ and in Christendom, as far as we know. I was ordained in 1978, and Mary Hunt was present at that service, took part in that service. And I was ordained with 2 other lesbians, even though we were not officially out as lesbians in our process, because we were seeking a collective ordination as all 3 of us. We wrote our papers together and things like that. But we were known to be lesbians. So I essentially have been out all of my ministry since then. And it was the same place, association that had ordained Bill Johnson. But that's part of the polity of the United Church of Christ. It's really hard for me to think of a highlight. Bill and I served as co-leaders, co-conveners of the United Church of Christ Gay Caucus is what it was first called, until it became the UCC Gay and Lesbian Caucus, and the Gay Lesbian Bi Caucus, and the LGBTQ Caucus, and now it's the Open and Affirming Coalition, because our understanding of who we are and of gender identities and choices has expanded over the years dramatically. But I would say, Mary, and everyone, that probably the most significant thing I have done is I have shown up. I have stayed with the church, with the process, even for 6 or 7 years, where after I was ordained and served in a couple different places for a few years, I couldn't get a job. I couldn't get a call. So I did a whole variety of things, like working with a women's moving business, worked at Redwood Records, worked in the Oakland Museum, all kinds of things, just putting my profile out there, trying to get work in ministry. And But during that time, I stayed active in the Northern California Conference, in the national setting of the United Church of Christ, serving on the board of directors at the Coordinating Center for Women, being elected to our executive council, where I was actually the first out person to be on that body. And when I was, so I stayed active, and it was important to me to be present, to represent the coalition in meetings nationally, also with the beginning of internet or ecumenical gatherings as well, which became incredibly important for all of us. I can't say that, well, I didn't start a new organization, I didn't do something, but I was present and persistent. I was out on my profile, which is why I got a lot of, oh, you sound interesting, but, and finally in 1989, I received a call to the United Church in Tallahassee, Florida. And that ended up being a wonderful setting for me to be in. I was actually the first out person in the United Church of Christ to be called to a pastorate as sole pastor through just the regular search process. There were others who were out in ministry and serving in churches, but they were either associate ministers, or they had been a student intern and became an associate or assistant and things like that. So there was that. And when I was called to serve as the executive director of the Coordinating Center for Women, I was the first executive in the United Church of Christ who was out then. So that's what I would say. To be in a place where you are there with the forces that have some influence and power and ability to change policies and decisions, to make decisions that would begin to include LGBTQ plus people, to raise questions about why we're not thinking about X, Y, or Z, all of that. And I would say someone, like Melanie has been a key person in the United Church of Christ, because she and her mother worked on a human sexuality curriculum, which eventually developed in later years into Our Whole Lives sexuality curriculum that we have done jointly with the Unitarians, which has been a profound, over the, almost 20 years, profound teaching for our children, youth, and young adults and parents in our churches about human sexuality and making choices and opening up spaces. So there's been a lot that's been going on that I have been in a position to help support, and sometimes challenge, sometimes make people uncomfortable. But I have stayed, it sounds stupid, but I've stayed in the system in order to make changes. So
Loie, thank you. Loie, thank you so much. You've not only showed up, but you've made an enormous difference. And I hope you know that. I also want to just mention your two colleagues who were ordained with you, Jody Parsons and Stacy Kazoulis, known to some people on this call. And I also want to mention your parents, Oliver and Eleanor Powell, who were supportive of your ordination.
Yep.
No small thing. Janie Spar. Thanks, Lo. Janie Spar. Unmute yourself, my dear. I know it's early in the morning in California. Take your time.
Thank you so much. Wonderful, Mary and Diane. And of course, there's my buddies, Loie and Celeste and Melanie. Well, there you all are.
And Gene Richardson is here. I mean, there's some heavy-hitting Protestants here this morning, I tell you.
So I wanted to think what was most helpful maybe for this, as we're trying to think of especially how we might work together and so on. So one of the things I think in starting Ministry of Light, which became Spectrum and now the Spar Center, is listening to the grassroots of our people. So there were 8 Presbyterian churches that really, essentially 5 Presbyterian churches that started this now LGBT center that's been going for 30 years. A lot has happened in there. And what we did is we listened to the grassroots of the people that were there. And I think what happened was, first of all, that people were stunned, especially LGBTQ were stunned that a church would care. Now, remember, this was in the 70s and 80s, in which churches were seen as an anathema to many of our communities. So we had to earn our way. And with that, then, we started then support groups, lesbian, gay, bisexual, then support groups. We had a speakers bureau. We had a family camp. We just listened to the ground of where our people were and what they needed most. We had a seminary group. We had where whatever people wanted to have, we began to create. And with that, the community began to burgeon out, and we got our own newspaper, and we began to meet with restaurant people. We began to work with the Board of Supervisors. We began to be known in the community where we are. So it is just organizing, and as Lori says, just personing the issue, just showing up. And what happens is, in the period of 10 years, we had grown not only a board that reflected more of who we were, but we had begun to organize in such a way that we were meeting the needs of the people. Waiting for the church, I think Troy Perry said it best, waiting for the church to accept us, we'd all be dead. So what we did is we first organized our own. What do our own people need? What are the things? And then we moved out into faith communities and joined them. But right then is, how do you buoy up your own people to say yes to ourselves? We needed to say yes to ourselves. And so we created, and I say we because it's always we that are doing this together. And we had fun together. In organizing, you really go into the grassroots, and then you bring people around. By the end of 10 years, we were mighty. We had gone out in the community and invited the community to become who we are. Then we challenged in every way politically. We did this around race. We would go to Board of Supervisors, and whoever it was whose turn it was, whether it was about women rights, gay rights, race rights, whatever it was, we organized together across many organizations. Okay, so that was, and then that has grown and become the center. They probably don't even know that they were started by church people. Honestly, that's how much it has grown. The second thing, I think, then we challenged the churches, those of us that were part of the More Light movement or dignity movement, whatever your movement may be, open and affirming. We wrote a letter to churches in the Presbyterian Church, and we said, quit telling us that you like us all the time. If you like us, then interview us. And if you interview us, then maybe you'll ask us to have a job. Maybe you will, in fact, employ us. Okay, so with that, I went to the downtown church, and by God, I went there to be interviewed just so they could see us. And I knew they were for gay people because they had made this statement. But what I said to them in interviewing them, I'm interviewing you as much as you're interviewing me, because my people have been so hurt by the church that I want to know where we can do our best work. And if we can do that and you can be open about that, terrific. But if you can't, well, so what happened is I interviewed never thinking, and they said, by God, they said yes. And then it was like, oh, whoa. So went into the church, and of course the denomination said no. We went on trial. That was the first trial. The denomination said no, I couldn't serve. But what this church did, and I think again, be creative against patriarchy. Because that's all what it is. It's a power over system. So what you do is, so they said, well, Janie, we're going to make you our lesbian evangelist. So with that, they gave me access to the country. And I traveled, and I always went out. Jesus was great, go out 2 by 2. Sometimes we went out 4 by 4, and we personed this issue all around the country. And even though some people were very cranky when they met us, how could they not like us? Because we're really fabulous people. And so we went in vans sometimes. We traveled through the South. We traveled all this time. But by the 5th year, because we're feminist women, by the 5th year, we said, because this is working, then what if we went into regions and helped employ our folks so that, for instance, I was employed in the national way. So then we went into Baltimore and in Atlanta and to Texas. We went all over the place. And we got people who were LGBTQ, especially LG then, some B, and we began to raise money to employ people where they were so that they could be personing the issue right in their area. And with that, that's with organizing. It's also about sharing power. It's also about when you have 8 organizations doing in their local area, you begin to buoy up a change. The whole thing is to change a system that is wrong, that is unjust, that does not include us, and so on. And you know how wonderful we are. We want to give them a chance to love us back, okay? Because we knew how wrong the church was. So after all these organizations had been started and going, then when I retired in 2007, that's when they took me to trial, which was just wild because I was marrying all these wonderful people who I love. And I think with that, there's something so fabulous about being with all the people that you married, because every time we had a trial, we all got together. And what did? We partied. And we thanked God, the goddess, we thanked her for bringing us together to challenge the church. It's always challenging a system that is so off, that is in its power over, does not know about sharing and so on. So you just keep inviting the church to be the church. And that's kind of there.
That's how you do it, Janie Spar. You got it done. And there's still a lot more to do.
Right.
Okay, for the people who are normally on this call, did I overstate in any possible way the dynamism and the commitment of these people? I mean, I lowballed it, didn't I? I mean, these are women who have made a real, and continue to make a real difference, and we are delighted to have you with us. I want to ask another question, and I'm going to go very quickly from Lois, Martha, to Janie, and then to Celeste. And my question is, okay, great. You did all this stuff. You've made enormous difference. Both of your denominations, the Lesbiterians and the UCC, ordain people like us. There's a lot of space. What are the issues now? What's your denomination doing? Who are the movers and shakers? And, where do you see the issues now? Just give us a thumbnail, and I really mean a thumbnail. Where is the UCC? Where are the Presbyterians? Where are some other folks who have long, like many of us, left those denominations and are looking elsewhere? So give us what are the issues now? Lo, I'll start with you, and then I'll go to Janie and Celeste. But keep it popcorn this time. Just a couple of quick things. What do you see?
Oh man, it's hard to keep that one popcorn, but I'll try to do it. I think all of our denominations have been engaged in anti-racism work, identifying white supremacy, intersectional work, and all of that. But I would say that probably our challenge is still to get beyond the words. Like now it's diversity, equity, and inclusion is all the buzzword and everything, and everybody's doing programs about that. It is for us to truly find ways to move beyond the rhetoric, to move beyond the little structured programs that we have to, that make us feel better as white people or straight people or whomever. So that's one thing. And the other thing I would say is that we are being challenged by the expression of gender identity and self-identities in ways that we've never been before, and that we all have much to learn about who we are, who is created in God's image, and how people are coming to embrace multiple identities that are stretching our communities in ways that are, I find, very hopeful and helpful and challenging at the same time.
Thanks, Loie. Janie, how about you? Where do you see us right now?
I see us right now, exactly what Loie is saying as far as racism. Thank the goddess, honestly, that we are doing some serious work. The very fact that you started with whose land we're on and so on. It's now Presbyterians actually are looking at that and so on like that. They happen to have a co-moderator who is Native American and really looking at the doctrine of discovery, and what we have done to Native American people is atrocious. So we're beginning to do work around that. We're also around racism across the board, which we welcome. And again, when you have a denomination that's predominantly white, or has been and is moving around as the country has claimed itself as well, so I think that has been really, really important in the denomination. And again, what actions are we doing? And then I could go on and on about non-binary and transgender. I mean, there's where it was one thing to talk about sexual orientation. It's another thing to talk about the galaxies of gender. And when you're talking about the galaxies of gender, we have amazing young people that are teaching us how to speak, how to look, how to, what is gender identity and so on. It is really patriarchy is being challenged in a way that is such a gift. It is taking people out of these horrific boxes where we have put one another. So I am so grateful to the transgender community and what we are learning there. And I think this is a huge push. And I'm hearing the same questions that we had with LGBT. There is not a congregation that I don't go into when we are speaking that says this. Well, what made you this way? What is this gender thing? All this kind of is fabulous. So when I'm asked to preach now, rather than me preaching, I say, thank you so much for asking. And I have this magnificent person who's transgender, and why don't you have them come to the pulpit? And I think that's where we begin to do change. So what's happening is they're transgender people. When they call me, I say, here's Suzanne, or here's Jordan, or here's so-and-so, and they're going into the pulpit, you see, and that's where we use our privilege, our white privilege and so on. And how do you change it? Well, let them meet transgender people and see how fabulous they are. So
that's great, JD. I'll just tell you that one of my forays into this was to get Erin Swenson, who many of you know, who was the first, as far as I know, Protestant clergy person who transitioned to be able to maintain her ordination after transition. And Erin Swenson is a great resource in the trans community, works as a therapist. And I introduced her to the Sisters of Mercy, 150 of whom spent an evening with her on Zoom. And their lives will never be the same, the Sisters of Mercy. And
she has a great curriculum for churches as well.
She's fabulous. And those women were so excited about her that one of them said, "Oh, you have been so phenomenal with us that we are now granting you the use of our religious initials, and you are a Sister of Mercy." Well, Erin Swenson, RSM, I mean, that was pretty hot. And just amazing to see how people can change with those encounters. And that's when you give it away. Celeste Berry, take it away.
Yeah, I'm not really involved in a mainline denomination anymore, although I obviously keep up a little bit through my friends. But it is interesting to see like the Unitarians expanding beyond, way beyond Christianity and unity churches. It seems like a lot of lesbians that I know are kind of, if they are part of a religious community, it's through unity or UU, more so than mainline denominations. And then I think that the little gift of COVID, which there's occasional gifts that we can see, has been the plethora of Zoom opportunities like we're experiencing this morning. But just the international work that I'm doing with the refugees allows, opportunities for church to happen with people from all over the world. So that's all. And I would just echo what you're saying about the gender fluid movement and the conversations about so much diversity and people of color and gender fluid people owning their truth and speaking their truth.
Thanks, Celeste, and thank you for your work with around immigration and migration and refugees. It just got tougher this week with 350,000 people in Ukraine on the move, and I think we're going to see a whole new constellation of the world emerging out of this crisis, and we need to be on our pins to do what we can. So my third question to each of you is, how do you as LGBTIQ religious people collaborating on a variety of fronts now, not just on religious issues and not just on sexuality, but around anti-racism, certainly around immigration, hopefully in peace work, how can we work together? How can we do some more things together? How can we bring the energies of your groups, both secular and religious, of your communities, and of the folks from our Catholic groups together? And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to lay that question out, let it sit there, and open the floor. So if Loie and Celeste and Janie want to make a very brief comment about that, or if you don't, I'm going to open the floor. So those who would like to make interventions would please raise your hands using the raise hands function down in the reactions button at the bottom right-hand side of your screen. Raise your hand, as I will do right now, to raise my front paw, which looks like this. And if for some reason you're not able to do that or prefer not to, you can always do this. So we'll keep an eye, but it's much easier if you do that. So that's the question, really. How can we work together? What can we do here? I want to acknowledge also Shannon Clarkson is with us, another longtime collaborator on these issues. So many folks who may have things to say as well. So the floor is open, but Loie, Janie, and Celeste, if you have any thoughts on that, please lead off. But if you want to just let it go to the group, we'll do that. Your choice.
I would say something really quickly. I remember the political campaign. I can't even remember who it was, but it was, it was like, it's all about the economy, stupid. For me, this work is all about the relationship, stupid. Like, it's all about the relationships that we are able, either individually or as organizations, establish with each other to show up for the Black Lives Matter protest in your town, to show up for support for Ukraine, to show up for the Violence Against Women Act, all these kinds of things that create the relationships among us that strengthen our coalitions. And it doesn't, other people don't have to be perfect. They don't have to be perfect about LGBTQ plus issues in order for us to show up. It's a process of education, of presence, of being with each other. Yeah, it's about the relationships. Actively.
Thanks, Loie, and you do that so well. I just have to say, you do that so well. Celeste or Janie, anything quick on this, or shall we?
Just exactly what Loie says. It's relationships. That's where it is.
And look at us. We didn't just start in this work, so that excites me too. That those of us, the three of you and myself and Diane and others have been at this, and many people on the call, 40 years, 50 years. It's amazing.
And yeah, and we did. We know each other through coming together. I think initially through Clout and other organizations, but the work that we've consistently done, we've included other people. So it comes back to Loie's comment about relationality and building community.
Yeah, I think Loie's right on the money on this. And we also have fun. I mean, I can't remember a time when I was with any of you that we didn't have a pure blast. The last time some of us were together was in St. Louis for the Rolling the Stone Away conference, which was a lot of the groups that have worked on these issues for a long time. And we had a great time. You remember, I mean, there are pictures to prove it, to me, that's 9/10 of it. I have to say, floor is open to other friends, and I want you to meet each other, because this is like a fabulous opportunity to meet wonderful people. So the floor is open. Please go ahead.
I see Janet Bourne.
I see Janet Bourne. Yeah, go ahead, Janet. Unmute, Janet.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Very quickly, years ago, I taught issues around gender and gender identity and all this stuff in high school. We were trained to do it. It was amazing. And all that's changed now. Schools are pulling way back, parents are yelling. And I am so concerned that we're pulling back from good gender and education around all these issues, especially transgender issues for kids. And I wonder if any of you have any thoughts on how to speak to the educational community and support the transgender kids, particularly who are out there fighting to have themselves heard and their parents fighting to have them heard. Thank you.
Thanks, Janet.
Do you want me to say something? The transgender, the transgender community is working very hard. There are amazing leaders in the transgender community who are working on all these issues, not only locally but nationally. And the national organizations that are working on all of this. So I appreciate, Janet, what you're saying, and it's just coming back and doing this work again and again and again. You know how long it took us, but just knowing there are powerful transgender people who are leading this movement, so I'm excited to be a part of it and to really listen and to follow their lead. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I just think I think we've all kind of talked about, because they're attacking the critical race theory. I mean, the racism in the schools, and then this "Don't Say Gay" bill in Florida. I'm like, so we're all so focused on defending ourselves, and we have to, it's easier said than done, but just consistently make sure that we're supporting, the LGBT community is supporting Black Lives Matter, is supporting Me Too, that we're all in it together and we're not taken off just because somebody's coming up with some wackadoo bill. I mean, we have to defend ourselves and move forward.
Thank you. Yeah. Who will be next?
Come on, Melanie. Speak up, Melanie.
Might be some Catholics out there that have some things to say too, although we've got it all under control, so we could teach. No. Oof, not. I recommend Jonathan Capehart's op-ed from, I believe it was yesterday, Washington Post on some of these questions. He's an African-American media star and brilliant person and out gay man. I recommend his recent op-ed.
Yeah, I do want to say,
Melanie, go ahead. Melanie Morrison.
Excuse me, forgive me, I didn't raise my hand. It's relationship building. It's also across miles. Of course, funding. Where are our dollars going? No? Who are we supporting right now? What kind of BIPOC-led organizations are we supporting? So just one I want to lift up, because Kimberly Crenshaw right now is doing phenomenally important work. She's the woman who really is the person who introduced us years ago to critical race theory and intersectionality. So the African American Policy Forum, AAPF, if you're not acquainted with it, they are doing phenomenal work supporting the teachers who are under attack around critical race theory and other things right now. And they're doing that across the nation. And I think constantly my question is, with whom am I in relationship that doesn't look like me? Huh? In my local community, statewide, nationwide. Thanks.
Thanks, Melanie. Very useful.
I just want to also mention, thanks, Melanie, for that, because I do think that philanthropy and the where to give, regardless of how much we have to give, is so important. And I'm part of a conversation around a group of lesbians wanting to come up with kind of a strategy to give to a lot of our sisters globally. So there's opportunities of coming together, even in terms of giving circles and things like that. So.
Mhm.
Yeah, all of which are part of this. And remarkable to think about the progress made on so little money over time. And also important to think about the hidden money that was behind it, especially the money that comes from our white privilege that doesn't show up on our balance sheets for those of us who are white.
So how can we be helpful? I mean, how can we, like you say, collaborate and so on? What about our sisters here in Dignity? How can we be helpful in ways that would be part of energizing one another and inspiring one another to keep doing the work? Because I think, it is really showing up and doing the work in all these different places. So how
How
might
about folks from Dignity who'd like to speak? Honor, I see you waving your hand. Others might wish to speak as well. We as Water, of course, are an alliance. And so part of our work is to bring people together, which is what we're doing at the very moment. So Honor, and then if others from Dignity would like to speak, please do so.
I want a copy of that list, Celeste. When you get that list together, share that list. But I think the women of Dignity do want to, or in their own cities are doing a great deal, but maybe not doing. We're not as global, or we're more local. And when we get together in San Diego this summer for our conference, one of the things we want to talk about is how can we support you in Minnesota and you in this neighborhood where they're after this school board and that type of thing. So and I know Mary and Diane are so great at sharing information from the different groups that we share with all the women of Dignity, and we don't always know who it hits. You know what I mean? Like, we send out the emails and it might just hit the right woman at the right time who jumps in, and we don't even know. So what we like to do is just share as much as possible and pray it goes to the right person at the right time. And please keep up your good work and share anything you want with Mary and Diane, and they always get it to us. So thank you.
Thanks, Honor. Others from Dignity who might want to say something, please, floor is yours.
Can I say something, Mary?
Sure, Lo.
My primary relationship in my life is not with someone who looks like me. Brenda is African American. My family is African American as well as white. And every day we feel what is going on in the world. I feel this in a way that is personal, that is deep, that goes into my cells every day. So those relationships that we are able to cultivate with people of color and people who are not like us are absolutely critical for being able to move forward, for one thing. The other thing I would say is don't overlook the importance of local action, local action with your school boards, with your city councils, with places where you can bring the voice of reason to schools that are needing a voice of reason. They're being attacked constantly by all these other crazy things going on. And I would also say, because this is a religious organization, we are all part of religious organizations and have connections to them, that the voice of faith on behalf of women is, and on all these issues, but right now, especially the voice of faith on behalf of women's lives and bodies is absolutely critical to be heard. Don't underestimate how important it is to say, as a person of faith, I support a woman's right to her own body, the choices that she makes for her own body. So all those states that are putting out these anti-abortion, this, that, and the other things, we are needed to speak. We are needed to speak up. Thank you.
Thanks, Loie. Very helpful. And you remind us, especially those of us who are Catholic, of the importance of, in fact, making just that affirmation in our own names, in the names of our sisters and our mothers and our siblings, because it really, it makes a huge difference. You help us with that. Mary Kay.
Good morning, people. I just want to thank you so much for this conference call. One of the things that I think is really evident within the Dignity Women is that they're getting educated. They're reaching out to other groups. They're having more times on Zoom. That is one of the positives of COVID, is that we get to stay connected with the Zoom and share each of our experiences. And I think that's really an important thing. I'd like to shout out to Patricia Russell out of New York, who has to come to the table on the third Sunday of every month. I think that provides us with our spirituality that we take out into the community and share with our local community, which we didn't have. I know Patricia has done it for a long time, but myself and my partner Donna, haven't really participated in it until like the last 2 years. Those kinds of events and the water events are something that has educated me and that I have taken to my family and taken out into my community, used as a way of making myself a better person and understanding a little bit. For us that are not that religious educated, we have a tendency to rely on other people's visions, imaginations, experiences, and bring it into our own soul to make us a stronger soul. So thank you for this event. I appreciate all your efforts. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, Mary Kay, and second the shout out to Patricia Russell. Patricia Russell's waving her hand, so you're going to have the last word before we break, and then we'll continue conversation.
good.
Go ahead, Patricia.
I love that last word. So, there's so much, nostalgia and power that when we look back to the 70s, remember them? The 80s, remember? And those 90s, they were magical. I mean, so many things were happening, and it was like there was power and there was community and there was relationships and there was all kinds of stuff. And I think what Donna just said, like the last 2 years of COVID, we've taken some opportunities to put some energy and some things into place that hopefully has helped people, helped us to energize ourselves and regroup ourselves and look at issues and not to be so isolated, because after the 90s, I mean, we kind of lost a lot. I don't know, maybe it was just because the world started spinning out of control. So hopefully this has been a time of a good reflection and an energizing time of space that we've been able to get moving, and let's carry each other forward and bless each other into the future of good change and good works.
Thank you. And just for those who don't know, Patricia Russell does a monthly Come to the Table, or every 3 weeks Come to the Table, which is an online worship experience, and it's wonderful, and all are welcome at that. Tracy Gary has put a lengthy piece in the chat, which I commend to your reading, about questions of philanthropy and the need for redirecting and really taking seriously the kind of work that we do in the philanthropic world. And I know Celeste is working there and others. So let's read that and take that into the continued conversation after the formal end of our time. And we are at that time. And I want to thank Loie and Celeste and Janie and all of you for being part of this conversation. It feels like it's just getting started. And it also feels like it's been going on for a very long time. I just have the sense that that there's real kindred spirits here. I'm going to ask Diane. I want to thank you. I can't thank you, and I owe all three of you, especially I owe you in the early morning. I want to ask Diane New to conclude us in prayer for this section. Then I'm going to ask Marianne Duddy Burke if she or Honor would like to say something. I think Honor would like to say something about announcements from Dignity, I'll close out with announcements from water, and then we'll, for those who wish to stay on, we'll continue conversation for a few minutes afterwards. But Diane, if you'd close us just with a brief word of prayer, and then Honor, if you'd pick up, that would be great. And again, thank you to Janie and to Loie and to Celeste. You fully are part of us, and we can't thank you enough.
This prayer is sending with gratitude, divine wisdom, spirit of compassion, justice, and peace seeker. We give thanks for this sacred hour together, for sharing with Celeste, Loie, Janie, and one another. Gratitude for the difference our commitments and hopes have made in the lives of our LGBTQIA siblings and in service of a more just world. Gratitude for strengthening one another to do justice and peace. Gratitude for empowering one another to be bold and brave. Gratitude for enlightening us that we may bring about your kingdom for LGBTQIA people of all traditions and none, and for all creation. Gratitude for the friendship we all enjoy, which makes our work so full of pleasure and promise. Gratitude. With gratitude and hope, we send one another forth, praying desperately for an end to war. Amen. Ashe. May it be so.
Thank you, Diane. Beautiful, as always. Honor?
Thank you. Just a brief announcement, then I'll turn it over to Marianne. The Women of Dignity, we have been meeting on Zoom since COVID began, and it's been really great. We used to just see each other every couple of years, and now we see each other quite frequently, and I think it's been wonderful. If any of you who aren't on the Dignity email, you can either let Mary and Diane know and I can get in touch with you, or you just email dignitywomen@gmail.com and you can get all our information, and I can get you Patricia's information if you email me there, and I'll pass it to Marianne.
Yeah, just adding my tremendous thanks for a very thought-provoking and rich conversation today. Lots to take away, and clearly the importance of community and expanding and enriching our communities is at so much of the heart. Thank you to all who shared for all the work you've been doing for decades and decades and decades to change our world and our religious communities. Couple more opportunities to dwell in community. I want to make sure folks are aware of, starting March 9th, Dignity USA will be sponsoring a series of Lenten scripture reflections. Invite you to sign up for the entire series or join them, the session as you can. The information's on our website or in the Dateline for folks who got that on Friday. Really welcome your presence for that. And also just want to let folks know that the registration for our upcoming conference in July will be moving forward. Looks like the COVID numbers have decreased to the point where it looks like it will be safe for us to gather. So we're really excited that we may be together in person this July. So look for that within the next 10 days or so. Thank you all for being here. And Mary, back to you.
Thanks, Mary Ann. I just have a couple of quick announcements from Water. One is that March 8th, International Women's Day, which falls on a Tuesday, we have decided to have a tea, a water tea, which is a coming together of the community to talk, and it will be focused on women's quest for peace. So we will have some very significant conversation that day coming out of this war experience. God only knows where we'll be at that point, but we had not planned a tea, but we have decided that we are in extremis, and of course we must gather and have a tea at 2:00 in the afternoon Eastern time on Tuesday, tea on Tuesday at 2. on March 8th. We also are happy to have Lillian Lewis, who is one of the Roman Catholic women priests, who will be leading our monthly meditation on the 14th at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and it will be on solitude. And then, as I mentioned earlier in the hour, on March 16th, we will have the pleasure of having with us for our monthly water talk Melanie Morrison, who made some remarks during this event. She will be talking about her new book, Letters from Old Screamer Mountain, and it is focused very much on many of the issues that we've raised here, especially the questions of anti-racism. And it's written in a beautiful way as letters to her late mother, Eleanor Morrison, who was very involved in reproductive justice, as well as in the Levin Center and the Levin community that she and Melanie set up in Michigan. And you'll hear more about that on the 16th at 1 o'clock Eastern Time. And then on the 22nd of March, Diane New will be leading a liturgy come to the Waters of Hope for World Water Day. That will be at 7:30 p.m. So again, I want to say that water programs are all open. They are not a fee-based program. It is our view at Water that if we share together, there's enough. So if you can share, share. And if you're not able to share, you're as welcome as anyone else. If we share together, there's enough. Don't you wish the world would begin to think in that way? If we share together, there's enough. And believe me, there is if we share. And if we don't, you know the answer. I want to turn to my friend Jean Richardson and give her the last announcement. I want to thank everybody for a wonderful discussion and just say that as soon as Jean finishes, we'll continue in conversation and we may pick up some of these questions, especially what Tracy Gary and other people have put into the chat. So, Jean Richardson, you get the last announcement.
Hey, wow. Well, it's been a pleasure to be with you, to see old friends, and just to listen and be together and really to do an alliance. I am the executive director of a little place called Kirkridge Retreat and Study Center. Some places call us the Stonewall of Retreat Centers. There is no one I love being in conversation with than Mary Hunt. We laugh, we cajole, we share deep thoughts, and we form relationship. You know, we always connect. She's always connecting me with people. Well, I decided that before I retire, there are people I want to talk to, and Mary Hunt was first on my list. So I'm going to have a conversation with my dear friend Mary Hunt, 4:30 to 5:30 this Thursday. You can go to www.kirkridge and look under programs. And again, it is also free. We would love to have you there. Feminist Friends in Conversation. So thank you again for Mary. Thank you, Janie, Loie. Celeste, haven't seen you forever. Diane, thank you all.
Great, Jean. And I just have to say, Jean Richardson will be retiring later this year from Kirkridge, where she has performed a distinguished service in that not little place, but that enormous place in Bangor, Pennsylvania, enormous in the hearts and minds of people seeking justice. It's been there for decades, and Jean has been the most recent director and has really done tremendous work, both to keep it open during COVID and to keep the level and quality and focus of programming on justice with a moral compass that doesn't fail. So congratulations to you on your impending retirement. Another Presbyterian, and just great.
Send us young people.
Yeah.
The job description's on the website. Pass it along, please.
Great. Will do. So the floor is open. Conversation may commence with in no particular order, but just raise your hand. And if people have to leave, you have to leave. But if you'd like to stay a few minutes, we would love to have you continue conversation. And again, Janie and Celeste and Loie, you are more than welcome. You're the reason for the season, but we also realize that you have lives. So we won't go longer than 15 or 20 minutes. Floor's open. Go ahead. Tracy Gary, did you want to say what you said in the chat in conversation? You'd be welcome to be the first one to do that. And Carolyn, is Carolyn still on? She had a good point as well. So just to give people in the chat the opportunity to do that if they want. Yeah, Tracy Gary, would you like to go ahead?
I'm very honored to be present for this wonderful and important dialogue, given the power of the church and the institutions and their destruction. I want to say that I've also derived a great deal of pleasure from hearing Jen Vaughn, who some of you know as the sort of one of the founders of the gift economy and a great researcher on matriarchy, that we are also trying all kinds of strategies to remember that the women for a long time, have held a lot of power and influence, and we still do. So the philanthropy piece is very complex, but it always troubles me every year in June to see the Giving USA figures that show so much money, a third of all giving in the country going to religious institutions, many of which are, a lot of that is supporting good work, but some of it is really, being directed by church elders, most of whom are men. So I just would love to hear any examples. I don't need to take up more airtime now, but anyone that wants, I'll put my email in, and I have examples of places where women really are taking over the finance committees. And as Loie and I learned early on, the Interfaith Committee on Corporate Responsibility, the investment side, we need to really also do more donor education of the women in spirituality movements and others, so that the women philanthropists who have this sort of bifurcation sometimes between their spiritual practice and their giving, that they're not actually funding the majority of projects that you all are involved with. And they need to know what they are and how to reach them and what they're doing, just as we got the really great suggestion about the African American Policy Forum, whose work I know well. So thank you.
Thank you. Anybody want to speak to that question? Thank you for being here.
Yeah, you can just take it home. I'll just put my email in.
Yeah. Well, if it makes you feel good this morning, I will tell you that one of the most egregious things I have done, and it makes me happy every time I do it, is I have told Catholic women that when they go to, if they go to church, which I don't recommend, but if they do go to a male-led Catholic service, that when the basket comes by and people put their money in, because that's a lot of Catholic money goes into the basket, that they just think of their mother and their grandmother and take that money out of the basket, because once it's in there, it belongs to everybody. And Catholic women have absolutely no say over finances in the Catholic Church, which has more real estate, more money in real estate. So I just tell people, take that money right out and, put it to use as your mother and your grandmother would have had it. And of course, some people are like, oh my goodness, but it keeps them from putting more money in. And so it's at least one, I offer it as a anecdote, but it also is the importance of being able, not only, as you say, to deal with the money that's in, but the investments and the alignment of values. And again, I go back to the Sisters of Mercy, who just recently talked about the alignment of their values in terms of extractables and how they need to be working there. But now they're talking about the alignment of their values in terms of people. And if they are going to focus their monies on renewable fuel, sorts of fuel, then they need to focus their money on a church that isn't harming women. And that's coming.
I just want to add that, because it's, Loie and I really saw, both, we could give example after example, but in the early 70s, it was, we know this, it was the nuns who said, no, we're not going to be involved in, the sin stocks. And, they've had a powerful voice on the investment side for a long time. So let's really remember our rich history on project after project that we could name, where we've gotten people to shareholder activist meetings and continue to do outstanding work. There's just a new generation of donors and others who need to have that history and that education sort of collectivized. And so that we can, with pride, find our voices and encourage women philanthropists and others. And remember, those who are involved with men, so if we live 7 years longer than them, we're going to end up with the legacy and the money. So let's really help them plan where they're going to leave their money, so that we can create a very rich present and future.
Yes.
Excellent advice. Excellent advice. The floor is open. Go ahead, folks. Melanie, go ahead.
I want to just name another group of organizations that deserve our funding. Okay, I don't need to talk long about how democracy is under threat of demolishment here in our nation. But some of the people who helped save democracy were people with disabilities in Wayne County, Michigan, and elsewhere. And so and I am so heartened by the young leaders today people like Dessa Cosmo, who started Detroit Disability Power. And they are putting out 150 pages about a document for disability organizations all across the country about how to bring people with disabilities to the polls. Huh? So I'm just, let's say there is phenomenal work going on. Don't let us ever doubt it, as we so discouraged with these same old Republican strategies with dividing us by race and immigration. And so don't doubt the work that is happening in local communities that are worthy of our funding. Okay, that's the end of my sermon.
Mhm.
Thank you. I saw another hand, I think. Was that Kathleen? You have to unmute, dear. Go ahead, Kathleen, unmute.
Got it. Okay, I got it. I just want to say another great big thank you and let you know that it has solved the problem for me, this whole thing, because I feel like I'm not powerless when I can send money to the people who know what to do with it. And I will do so immediately. And it was so nice to hear everything and meet all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen, and I know you will. Who will be next?
I think that this would be a wonderful conversation to have if those of us, those persons presenting had reached the age of 40, maybe 35, and weren't just, sort of like hardcore straight lesbians, but brought variety into that. It would be a very interesting conversation to have that would push us all forward.
Yeah, and that's the sort of thing we need to do, but we probably aren't the best people to do it. I mean, that's the question of how do we empower the best people to do that, especially young people. And I think that's the question that we're always raising. How do we use those resources that we have to empower that conversation? Yeah. But you're absolutely right. This is a little step along the way. Jewish women will be another step, and hopefully we can build something. But really, where are those organizations? Where are those groups that were part of the religious? What was it called, Celeste? The National Religious Roundtable. Where are they these days?
Yeah.
Is there any leadership at that level from Human Rights Campaign or from any of the other national groups, NGLTF? I mean, are they doing anything on religion at this point? Is it just the women? Is it women that are doing it all?
As usual. Yeah, I mean, both the task force and HRC and others have religious roundtables, but you're right. I mean, and COVID obviously has put everything on hold, but creating change is happening online, I think, this week. But I think my hope is that just as Marianne mentioned, Dignity is meeting face-to-face later in this year, that some of these conversations, as powerful as the Zoom opportunities are, some of these, it's really these face-to-face opportunities to hear our sisters and brothers and siblings, younger and the diverse community that creating change brings together, et cetera. But just constantly also, talking among ourselves to kind of figure out next steps and ways that we can support those groups, but also continue doing work that's relevant. I put just a little chat, just to call out Safe Place International, which is the organization that I work with refugees, and most of the work is on Zoom. So there's opportunities to participate that way.
See, that's the other side of the coin. Everybody rags on Zoom, but when you think about the fact that when we were doing some of the work 40 years ago, we didn't have cell phones. We hardly had phones, to even call each other. Remember, you had to think about should I call Loie? How much is that going to cost? Is it in my budget to make that call? You know what I mean? Remember those thoughts? Who would even think them now? But that was a real thing about whether you could actually if you had the money to call somebody that you needed to. I mean, I remember when Water got a fax machine. I mean, that was like, so with all the technology that we have and all the progress we've made, I see lots of opportunities, but they're no substitute, you're right, for the face-to-face, to know who to call, know who to talk to, and to be able to pick up the instrument and do it. It's hard work. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? How about some other ideas?
I want to tag on to what you said, Loie. Basically, how do we get beyond ourselves? We have this conversation in every group usually, and it was just this past week with the Women Church Convergence that we were asking a same question. And one of the people, I thought, wisely said, people will gather with the people that they need to gather with, and we need to trust that. And a piece of me felt some great wisdom in that. I mean, I look around the screen today and think, okay, it would be nice if it were broadened to this, and this group. On the other hand, it's important, I think, for us to have this kind of conversation together with the colleagues that are here. So it's a both and. We need to gather with similar groups so that we keep our energy and our commitments going. And we need to expand our circles so we keep our commitments and our energies going.
Diane, I do think we need to gather with people who need each other. And this is one of those spaces today. And I want to say that I feel many organizations I've been affiliated with over the years have asked kind of repeatedly the wrong question, which is, why aren't they here? And I think the question is, why aren't we there? With whom are we, how are we showing up, as Loie talked about, in organizations in our local communities? Perhaps we are, I'm not assuming we aren't, and I know that when those are people of color-led organizations, that means not just once or twice or three, it means developing relationships over years of to become known as potentially trustworthy collaborators, So I think I want to always ask myself the question, where am I? Not sort of, why aren't they here? I just want to lay that alongside what you have said. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else before we come to a close? Janie, something
Well,
on your mind?
I'm just thinking so much of the community of Native Americans, of which I have been invited into, that has been the thing too that Melanie's saying, and so too. It's well, this old extrovert has learned to be quiet, and really listen into. I mean, the things that we have done have been so horrendous in the Native American community and so on. And just for you to know right now, many are meeting in Geneva around water and around mountain rights and all these kinds of things that are going on. There are people doing amazing things, Native Americans, but they're not waiting for white people. I'll never forget being at one of those meetings in Geneva, in which this one woman said, well, you think we come here for us? We come here for you, that you might one day do the right thing. And I was just blown away, because they're talking about moving their ancestor bones and water rights, all this kind of thing. And they said, you're talking about our mother. These amazing moments in these very sometimes patriarchal situations, which are talking about, no, the world is our mother. And so I think of people aren't waiting for us. They're doing their own work. I mean, people, because we can't wait. It's just so I've learned a lot. And like you say, it is really building relationships and really listening. And like this one friend of mine said, now listen, she said, don't get up and start doing the dishes when we're done, because wintertime is story time. So we sit at the table and we tell our stories, because that's what we do. And it would have been just like me, little white girl, to get up and think, well, I want to be efficient and do the thing. But the things that happened at that table and the stories that I heard. So again, it's how are we listening and not to get in the way, but to be with, and so that am I making any sense here? It's all of that. Because I just feel like, we want to be so helpful or whatever, but people know how to be helpful, so I've learned a lot about being quiet, and also watching how people make change in a different way than I would make change. And that has been a huge learning thing for me. So I don't, and there's young people doing all kinds of things that all different colors and so on. I mean, and the transgender community, I think where our faith community might be so helpful. It's like we just had a naming ceremony for a woman who was Catholic, who wanted her name to be said, as transgender. She had her name and so on. It's because her family told her that the police would come and get her if she walked into a church. So we did her naming ceremony in a church. You can do a naming ceremony in a mountain or whatever, but it's important. And this work that we're doing, this little house that we're doing, 8 faith communities are bringing food every week. Do you know what that has done to the transgender people that come there, who've been thrown out of their faith communities a long time ago? They weep every time food comes, because we don't ask them for anything. We just say, we want you to be who you are. It's those kind of underpinning things that change and heal in a way, like bringing food, I don't know. It's just thoughts on the way.
Thank
Yeah,
you. I just so value that and what you're doing, and the opportunities are out there. Sometimes we are in silos and it's hard to know where to go, but just being able to serve on boards. I think that also there is a sense among people of a certain age that feel like we're irrelevant, and that so what can we do? And I think I've been thinking for a while of reaching out to younger lesbians in particular that are building organizations. And I built an organization, so I want to give an opportunity to, not tell this person how to build an organization, but there's so many. I had a million questions when I was flying, my airplane and building it while I was flying it. And so just being able to offer a mentorship, and it's a feminist mentorship, so it goes both ways, right? So, but there's so many opportunities for board members, for mentors, for other ways to help continue our work, but also let other folks take leadership.
Yeah, so helpful, Celeste. Thank you, Diane.
Celeste, I'm happy to hear you say the word lesbian. Several times you've said it today. It seems like the word is falling out of use. Is it?
I think that the whole conversation among this group of women looking at funding lesbian work people keep saying, that lesbians are the last to get funding. We're the most invisible of the LGBTQ. That's debatable, but it is interesting. People have a hard time with the word lesbian, probably for many reasons, misogyny being one of them.
Well, folks, we've been at this now for longer than we had anticipated, and I want to thank you and thank you and thank you again, especially to Celeste and Loie and Janie, and to all of you who have joined today. And I go away, I must say, humbled by the incredible work of people, but really daunted by what remains, not what remains, but the work that needs to be done. And my reflection is, how do we best connect with groups whose leadership we shouldn't be in, we aren't in, but how do we make those connections? That's going to be my thought. How do we make those connections, whether in the local community or especially with people who are very different from us? But what are some of the mechanisms for doing that? And I look around this, I think of a wisdom circle right here, and those who've gone on to other things today. But I look around this as a wisdom circle, and I think, how do we even connect as this wisdom circle and others, where we have various pieces of what we need? We have analysis, we have strategizing, we have philanthropic work, we have enormous experience, we have the wisdom that comes from the mistakes that most of us have made along the way, which have been enormous. And we still have, at least among us, most of us, the health and the marbles, as it were, to keep doing this work for some time longer. So how do we connect? What's the next level of connection? And I don't have an answer for that, but I can commit from water to say that it's something we'll be thinking about, with Dignity Women with whom we connect. I don't know if there are other groups, I know there are other groups, but just to say, if you could take home with you one thing, think about how we connect, and let's be intentional about that, because I think it would be to squander enormous resources if we didn't. And I'm talking about human and financial and intellectual resources. I think of all of you who went to San Francisco Theological Seminary. I think of the cadre of Presbyterian folk who, my goodness, that church may be falling down in terms of its membership and so forth, but you are expanding exponentially that work, ways that they never imagined when they dissed you. I mean, they never imagined that Out and Equal would eclipse them by, thousands of people, or that Trans Heart would become an ecumenical agency in one little house in San Francisco, or that Kirkridge would really burgeon in the hearts of people even in tough times, and that Levin would have the impact that it's had. And Shannon, your DMIN program continues to bear fruit. I mean, I just think, wow. And Loie, all that you have done and continue to do, it stuns me. And yet, what do we do now? What's our encore, gals? What's our next act? So I'll leave you with that.
I want to thank you, Mary, and you, Diane, for staying the course for the long haul and continuing to grow and change and ask those questions that you just asked. And thank you for bringing us together.
You're more than welcome, and we'll do it again.
Absolutely.
Have a great rest of your Sunday, everybody.
Thanks,
Enjoy.
everyone. Thanks, Mary.